Hey everyone, Moon here. Welcome to the final episode of the Zero to Hero series, a series where around 4 months ago, I set out to accomplish one of the most difficult achievements within PvP, being to achieve my first gladiator. While I initially wanted this to go for a few more episodes, I'm leaving for vacation in 4 days and won't be back until a few weeks into the next season. Without further ado, let's jump right into the episode. Last episode, I talked about how I went through a few different teams before finally settling on a team to go the remainder of the push with. Things were going great for us, and I had rapidly climbed from 2080 to around the 2240 rating range. I felt like I synergized with this new team well, and that the sky was the limit, and for the most part, that reigned true. Since last episode, we had continued to rack up the wins, climbing higher and higher. The way our composition was set up, we were able to decisively beat most caster cleaves, and for the most part we were able to handle our own versus melee cleaves too. Additionally, I had just received my VOD review coaching from the BlizzCon champion Sidu, and he was able to pinpoint some aspects of my gameplay to improve. I had done the homework since then and was seeing rapid results in my ability to win versus more teams. After another solid day of climbing, I was able to reach a new seasonal high of 2300. I was ecstatic that I was so close to playing at the number of my previous experience, being 2351. Although a part of me still felt resentful at the dynamic fluctuation of rating between the seasons. While I was happy that I was climbing and taking games off of some of the most elite players in the game, such as Calvish, Tuna, the entirety of F tier, and others, I was simultaneously annoyed that I was having to play against them at the 2300 bracket. And look, I understand that Blizzard's piss poor job of managing the state of PvP makes it to where players at the top really have no other choice but to smurf in order to get Qs. But it still has a trickle-down effect on impacting the rest of the ladder in a negative way. As for instance, games at 2100 require a skill level much higher than 2100 to climb out of the bracket. While I've been weathering this for the entirety of the season without losing much faith, I really began to sympathize with the majority of the PvP player base that this would have been especially grueling for, say the average 1800 rated player to endure for 4 months straight. And it wasn't long before disaster struck for me either. One of the nights we were queuing, we got especially unlucky with the teams we were playing against. For those of you who aren't too familiar with arena compositions or matchup theory, I'll explain a concept real quick regarding counter compositions. Classes in general will have a certain utility that makes them do well in other classes. For instance, shamans generally do well against caster DPS, as they have Tremor Totem, which protects them from fears, charms, and sleeps, Grounding Totem that absorbs spells casted within the area, and a short cooldown kick which allows them to consistently disrupt spells from being casted. A mage is generally good into melee DPS, as they have some of the highest mobility, utilities such as roots, spammable crowd controls such as polymorph, and with a specialization such as Frost, consistent slows to keep melee DPS off of them. That being said, one night in particular we were queuing against a turbo cleave, warrior, enhancement shaman, discipline priest, that absolutely hard countered us. The enhancement shaman was able to negate all three of us from being able to do anything. Between the fear immunity, grounding totem to stop my boomkin's damage, and curse dispel preventing myself from landing hexes on the enemy team, we were pretty much destined to lose the matchup. Which leads me to my next point. Because this season is very deflated, and with the addition of other alternative game modes such as Plunderstorm, this season has been one of the least played to date, meaning that once you reach around the 2200 to 2300 threshold, there are often only a single digit number of teams queuing at any given time. This turbo cleave wouldn't have been a big deal necessarily if we only played them once and lost. However, they happened to get on an unlucky loss streak too, and as we tanked, they tanked. We ended up playing against them 4 times that night and lost all 4 of our matchups. Additionally, we experienced a higher number than normal of Ret Warrior Fistweaver teams queuing as well. And with their explosive damage, sometimes we would flat out lose against them without their major cooldowns running. It was frustrating starting the cast of a healing surge when my balanced druid is at 80% health, only for him to randomly die before the cast of the heal finishes. We end up losing around 80 rating, tanking back down to 2200, and it was a rough reality check that nothing in this game is guaranteed, and that you can lose rating just as fast as you gain it. Not all hope was lost though, because in a grueling set of around another 30 games or so, we were able to gain back the rating and even push to a new seasonal high of 2341. I'll admit, I was excited and somewhat nervous as I was within 1 game of surpassing my experience. We just needed that 1 win to send me over the top, and I could at least walk away from the season knowing that I've improved my XP. But as we've previously learned a few minutes ago, nothing comes easy nor as anticipated, because I yet again hit another loss streak and tanked around 100 rating. The second time was just as demoralizing as the first, because it wasn't a matter of if I would be able to fight my way back. Now this was a question of how far is this going to set me back, and how much time is this going to eat away at the little time I have left. The answer was another 2 days, with us gaining around 50 rating each day, but I was finally able to get it back on the ascent and continue the push upwards. I finally got that one win I needed to surpass my experience, and it was now sitting at a nice 2358. This was the highest I've ever been in WoW Arena, and I was moderately anxious of continuing to climb and push further because I was afraid that I'd lose it all. But we continued. One more win, 2374. One more win, 2388. Our MMR kept skyrocketing too, to where we were playing at the 2500 range. I just needed one more win to lock in the elite for the season and start the counter of the 50 game gauntlet to achieve gladiator. We queued up and narrowly lost against a Dancing with the Stars team. No worries. A win against a random Hunter Warlock team set us up to a new season high of 2394, just 6 points away from elite. We played against the same team again, and we lost. Again. My bootcamp practically lagged out during our 1 kill window, and I was experiencing world ping issues for the past several games. Playing at 300 MS when you're used to 70 is never fun, and while this isn't anything out of the ordinary to say Australian players, to us, it completely changed how we were able to play the game. So we stopped playing for the night after another loss. Logging in the next day, we were able to get back within 1 win of achieving elite, and seeing as we were queuing at a different time, it was likely that we were going to be fighting a different team. We pressed Q, we loaded into Dalaran sewers, and our opponents were the same turbo cleave we had previously lost to around 9 times previously. And in unceremonious fashion, we took another loss. We won again against a shadow play, and then we lost again to the same turbo for the 2nd time on the same day. But this day, things were different. We lost again, we lost again, we lost again, and we lost some more to the teams soon after. Mainly to melee cleaves who were throughputting over 200k DPS combined, killing us on globals, or using micro CC to stop my casts so they can one-shot my teammates. I was fuming when I had a game where I was getting trained by a Ret warrior, ran out of cooldowns, ran out of instant cast heals, so when I pressed my Spirit Walker's Grace to give myself kick protection, I got hit with a blinding light that was used as a kick, followed by dying in a shockwave stun that was less than 1 second long, seeing as it was on diminishing return. We tanked all the way back down to around 2315, and that's where we stayed. The next 3 nights we experienced no luck, bouncing back and forth between 2280 and 2330. We were becoming hard stuck. One night in particular, we caught an awful feedback loop where there were only 2 teams queuing around our rating bracket, a DH Evoker team and a jungle team. We spent 10 games going between winning against the DH Evoker team and losing to the jungle team, over and over and over and over again. After losing to the DH Evoker team just 1 time, I decided to call it for the night. That was the start of the end for me. Knowing that there were so few teams queuing to where this scenario could even happen was extremely demoralizing. It made me wonder why I even bothered continuing to play when so many have quit already or are just not bothering to play this season. I wondered why even continue to play or get good at a game that virtually nobody cares about anymore. While I don't like inherently talking about this, as many seem to use the following topic as a crutch, I'll admit that at this time my mental health took a turn for the worse. As my team could only queue late at night, and I currently work 10-hour days at my office job, I'd have to intentionally mess with my sleep schedule just to get in games. I got into the habit of coming home from work, going to bed for 4 hours, waking up, playing, and going to bed for another 3 hours at the end of our queue session. My exercise dwindled too because of this, and I definitely wasn't getting enough movement during the day. I stopped hanging out with my friends, and I stopped spending time with my family for weeks while I played these games, hoping that it would all be worth it once I reached my goal. The result, unfortunately, was that I was just harming myself and feeling worse the more that I played the video game. But the craziest thing is, I was still willing to persevere and get through it all, because I wanted to finish something I set out onto. I kept queuing and queued some more, thinking that just with 1 more lucky win streak I'd get there. With just 1 win streak, it'd all be worth it. But my joy for the game diminished over time. I resented playing World of Warcraft. I began to dread logging in because I knew I'd lose playing versus a stacked deck with the meta, better players, the deflated season, etc. I began to get annoyed with my teammates too. While there were games that I certainly threw and lost because of large errors on my part, my team wasn't understanding of the fact that Shaman global cooldowns are very slow compared to other healers, and were trying to expect things out of me that weren't physically possible, then seeming annoyed with me when those things couldn't happen. I thought to myself, if I could just tolerate this a little longer, it'll all be worth it, and I'll have this achievement and mount, and I can scream from the rooftops that I've joined the ranks of the elite PvPers in the game. But it never happened. The final nail in my coffin wasn't even in-game related, but instead hit me IRL. Shortly after one of my queue sessions got cut short in the middle of the night, my mother was rushed to the ER for some medical problems she had been having. Thankfully, she's alright now and has since been discharged, but having a medical scare like that changes your perspective on things. I was lucky I was still awake to watch over the house and take care of things as I was covering second shift at my job for another coworker. Another day passes, and I think things would go back to normal. when I wake up and go to work at my job, only to discover that my company received a massive hit of layoffs that morning. 12 people in my department were directly affected by the layoff, including one of the people on my direct team who was okay with working nights. This left my workplace scrambling for a little bit to make up for where my team member was supposed to fill in shift-wise, and suddenly I found myself working a 65-hour work week. With these things happening simultaneously, combined with needing to get my stuff in order before leaving for vacation, I decided it just wasn't worth it to put myself through these conditions for any longer to try to get some achievement in game. Does it suck quitting when I was right on the precipice of greatness in PvP? Sure it does, but with all that happened in my real life combined with myself hating playing PvP in its current state, it would have been foolish for me to continue. When I started this series, I asked a question if a newly formed arena team can reach Gladiator for the first time, with nobody on the team having achieved Gladiator before at the time. The answer to that question is no. They weren't able to. The past 4 months have been crazy, and perhaps things would have been different if events happened in a different way. Perhaps I could have played in LFG more. Perhaps I should have started the series solo and went from there. Maybe I should have been more cutthroat with the people I did end up playing with. Maybe I should have re-rolled healers. Maybe things would have gone differently if my original team had never switched compositions. While it's all stuff I think about from time to time, I'm not going to let the prospects of what if haunt me, because this story played out the way it did. But I will say it played out vastly different to how I expected. I never would have anticipated going from being a nobody in the PvP community to having players whisper me in game saying that they saw my videos. I never expected to meet the people I did along the way, and I have a ton of new connections that only opened up in the past few months with players I didn't know prior to the season starting. If you told me at the beginning of the season that I would receive coaching from a BlizzCon champion, which helped me climb nearly 200 rating, I would have told you that you were crazy. I didn't even expect to crack my personal experience of 2351, but I ended up passing it by 43 points. I did expect for games to get harder as I climbed, but I didn't expect to be taking games off of AWC competitors. Yet, here I was, winning against them every so often. And when it comes to perspective, guys, remember that in episode 1, I was 1800 and still clicking on my frames with mouse over macros to heal arenas with. Even though I wasn't able to hit my goal of becoming a gladiator, I've still definitely come a long way, and I'm proud of the progress I've made this season. And I've come closer to it than I would have ever imagined with the way the early season was looking. So what's next for me? Well, when I get back from vacation will be about a week and a half into season 4. Am I going to run it back with the new knowledge I found and try again for Gladiator in season 4? Honestly, no, probably not. While I can appreciate the effort I've put into the game and the skill I've attained with this series, I can also acknowledge that I'm not having fun with PvP, and the state of it is abysmal given the levels of neglect it receives from the developers. If I continue to play PvP, it'll likely be in a casual sense with friends. In confining myself to such a small part of the game, I've been restricted from the majority of the game that is World of Warcraft. I want to fall in love with the game again and explore the things I previously hadn't gotten to do as a result of going so hard in PvP all this time. I really want to try my hand at Mythic Plus and maybe some raiding, as the skills I've developed from Arena seem to translate quite well to that side of the game. I'm even open to giving roleplay a good shot, or maybe even trying out some mount farming or transmog collecting. I want to fall in love with World of Warcraft again, meet new friends who I'd have never met if I was just doing PvP, and get to explore a side of the game that's still rather foreign to me. Even though I never became a hero in this series, I did everything I wanted to do with this series by telling an authentic story of what it's really like for someone on the PvP ladder today. Not every story ends with a happy ever after, but at least you're still gifted with the wisdom of having been through it all. I don't know where my next story will begin or what necessarily awaits me, but I'm excited for the future. If you'd like to come along, I'm more than happy to have you join me by subscribing. But until next time, this is Moon, signing out.